Focus on the problem. Focus on the damn problem. Take 0. All right, so over the last 3 days, I've had to have these conversations. I definitely had to have 2 of them. I've had to have 3 pretty tough conversations with people. And the theme of all 3 of these conversations was, you're not focusing on the problem. So I've been thinking a lot about, why is it people struggle to focus on the problem the customer has? When it comes to digital transformation, a lot of people don't even ask themselves the question, why am I doing this? Like, why am I doing what I'm doing right in front of me? It's amazing to me that people are constantly connecting a task, a thing I'm doing, with a deliverable, and then connecting the deliverable to a problem the customer has. I mean, I see it everywhere. When I get invited to a manufacturing facility or an industrial site and I see something they're doing, and then I ask them, why do you do that? What problem does that solve? The blank stares I get. Okay, sometimes I get an answer. Most of the time I get blank stares. Now, this isn't from, an engineer I'm taking into the finance department, okay? This is an engineer asking them an engineering question, a domain that they're clearly supposed to be fluent in, and I get blank stares. When I talk to integrators, a lot of integrators reach out, having trouble going to market, hey, I'm struggling in my business in this area. And the first thing I ask them is, why should anyone hire you? And they'll say, what do you mean? And I'll say, well, what are you the expert in? Like, what problem do you solve? And I get blank stares across the board. And this could be a new integrator or an old integrator. And I literally get the blank stare. It's as if it never occurred to them. Okay. OEMs. I'll talk to an OEM. They'll hire me to consult. And I would say, when it comes to the OEM, I'm going to say it's about 50% of the time they can't answer the question, what problem they solve. Okay. Half the OEMs can. Okay. And, because they've quantified the ideal customer profile, and they had somebody in their business development group put together features and benefits. And because they're business development people, they want to connect the features and benefits of their product to some problem the customer has, right? They're looking for keywords that the customer is going to say so they can point them to something on their line card. I'd say half the time the OEM can answer the question, or at least they can give an answer. They may not be giving the right answer, okay? They may not know the problems that their product solves. But one of the things that I have observed is, in this industry, if you are talking to a person who has worked in manufacturing, if you're talking to an OEM that started from people who worked in manufacturing, or you are talking to an integrator, was either started by a person or has many, many people with experience working for the manufacturer, they never struggle answering the question. And it got me thinking, yesterday in Mastermind, we did part 2 of Mastermind yesterday was focus on the problem. And I was talking about, because in Mastermind lately, it's really gotten a lot, because we've been doing so many technical workshops. A lot of the lessons that I've been giving in Mastermind are based on feedback in the surveys. And a lot of people have been asking more philosophical questions lately. And so I've been giving, one part of my 3-part lesson has been a philosophical discussion. And yesterday it was focus on the problem. And I want to add to that today. When people reach out and they ask me questions, how have I been successful? How was I successful as an engineer working for the manufacturer? And by the way, I started shoveling belts. Then I went to maintenance. Then I became an electrician. Then I became an engineer doing controls. When I was an electrician, I was doing controls. I just wasn't called engineer because I didn't have my degree yet. I didn't have an engineering degree yet. How have I been successful there? And then how was I successful becoming a consultant, working for other integrators? I worked for 2 other integrators, and then as a integrator myself, starting my own firm, and then starting 4.0 Solutions, and I have all these other branched out companies. How have I been successful in all those things? And the short answer is, I always focus on the problem in everything I do. When I shoot a video right now, before I shot this video, I asked 4 questions. Why should anyone listen to me? Okay, well, they should listen to me because I have a track record of success and I can articulate my thought process clearly. All right, there's a reason for me to shoot a video. Number 2, what am I going to say? What I'm going to say is focus on the damn problem. What are they going to hear? Well, that's going to depend on who's listening. But I suspect some people are going to hear, I'm on the right track because I focus on the problem. Some people are going to hear, maybe the fact that I'm not focusing on the problem is why I'm overwhelmed all the time, and why it is I seem to get 6 or 8 months into a project and this awesome thing that we've delivered, the customer isn't completely satisfied with. So some people might hear, maybe I need to be focusing on the problem. People are going to hear, who the fuck is this guy? Fuck him, you know? And then what will you say is most valuable is the question I asked. And hopefully, what everyone takes away from this video is that we lose sight. The most valuable nugget is I see people all the time losing sight of what's most important. And that is the problem you are trying to solve. People get stuck in the weeds. Scope creep is always scope creep is a function of either your original statement of work didn't include the actual problem, the solution to the actual problem the customer had, or what you've built so far has made the customer smarter and they have realized other problems they have that they need solved. But it always comes from a problem, and people don't focus on it. But I can summarize how I've been successful in that one sentence, which is I always focused on the problem. I don't understand, if someone's not focusing on the problem, then what the fuck are they focusing on? Like, I had a conversation the other day. I had 2 this week, or I had 5, but I had 2 really long ones. So I had conversations with 5 integrators this week. Okay, we're getting ready to do this integrator growth program. Okay, where a lot of integrators have started to reach out and ask about help scaling their business. Either they're a 1 integrator outfit and they want to scale to 5 or 10, or they got 10 people and they want to go to 20. They got 20, they want to go to 50, and they want the revenue increase, they want the impact increase to be commensurate with that growth, right? And a lot of people struggle with scale. In this integrator growth program, we're taking applications for it. I think we're doing 20 integrators total. I think we have 9 that we've signed so far. We've rejected, I think, 16 or something. And the plan is starting in October, I'm going to do these 4 workshops, 1 per month. And it'll be 1 day, 4 hours. In October, I'm doing foundations of an Industry 4 integrator. In November, I'm doing business development. So I'm going to teach how to manage business development at Industry 4. Go to market, account management, all that stuff, managing the pipeline, creating the KPIs to help track the business. Then December is operations, how to manage operations utilization, how to manage engineers, how to manage projects, projects in parallel, all the KPIs you need to manage scale there. Then in January, I'm doing finance. Okay, so ARAP, capital investment, cash flow, all that. And then starting in February, the 20 integrators are going to get broken into 2 groups of 10. And we'll do a morning session and an evening session. And then it'll be 1 session per month called the cohort. And the integrators are going to be tasked with taking everything they've learned. So they'll be implementing for 1 month and coming back, and we'll be measuring progress. In the cohort, they're going to bring their issues, and then we're going to advise together on how to help them scale. Or I'll do it one-on-one with them, depending upon if it's confidential stuff that they want to talk about. All right, where did that come from? It came from a problem. And the problem the integrators are having is building their business model for Industry 4 and then scale. So the Integrator Growth Program is a solution to a very specific problem that came out of the community. And it's an overwhelming one. I've really held off on doing this because, how do I vet somebody for my values in a way where I don't want to teach somebody how to scale their business and then find out that they're a dirtbag. You know what I mean? At the end of the day. That solution comes out of a lot of conversations about how did you do what you do. This week, I've had 5 conversations with integrators. Okay, people who have reached out to me, because we started talking about IGP, there are integrators who reached out to me to discuss their businesses. So I had conversations with 5 integrators. The size of these integrators ranged from 1 person to about 40, okay, across the 5. And for 3 of the integrators, their number 1 problem was that they don't focus on the customer's problem. They'll be like, I'm having trouble finding work. And I would go, okay, well, there's 3 questions here in your business. Number 1, what are you an expert in? Like, what is your organization an expert in? Why should anyone listen to you? Why should anyone hire you? Why should anyone pay $180 to $220 an hour for your services, as opposed to getting somebody on Upwork for $60 an hour to be a developer for Ignition? What's the reason they should hire you or your company? Number 2, how do you get in front of those people? Okay. And then number 3, how do you execute and deliver on the promises? You want to know how many integrators struggle answering all 3 of those questions? Fucking all of them. And, to test it, I reached out to a couple of really large integrators I have relationships with. They couldn't answer the question either. Now, one guy who was an executive and he's a smooth talker, he tried to give an answer on the fly, but I didn't let him off the hook. I cut him off. It was like, come on, man, don't sell me. Answer the question. And he froze. He said, you're right. We don't have the answer to those questions. Which brings me to my point here, focusing on the problem. There are a lot of integrators. There are a lot of people who are consulting who never ask themselves, why should someone hire me or hire the integrator I work for? Why should they hire us? Over the course of the history of our industry, most of the time, the reason you were hiring an integrator was because they're the channel partner. Wonderware is the one who marketed their product, InTouch. Wonderware marketed the product to the machine builder. And the machine builder was the one who was building the screen plant in your salt mining facility, okay? Or the OEM was the one who was installing the control pulpit for the rolling mill line, okay? The machine builder is the one that said, well, we need an interface for supervised control and data acquisition. Oh, Wonderware, let's look at this Wonderware. And Wonderware's got all these channel partners. And so when the OEM would go, hey, who's going to install this? Oh, we have an integrator partner who will do it for you. They'll quote it for you. For 20, 30 years, through the 90s and all the way up until 2012, 2013, that's how it was done. You didn't go to the integrator because they were an expert. You went to the integrator because someone recommended it. Industry 4 changed everything because that integrator, the legacy integrator, they specialize in a specific project. They just do the same project over and over and over again. Or the way they scale is they do the same project, same 8 projects over and over and over again. This is why you see so many integrators in water, wastewater. There is a reason there are so many integrators that do water, wastewater. You want to know why? Because you can get written into the contract if through corruption, you can get written into the request for quote. So your buddy who's in charge of, writing the RFP can write you into the request for proposal. And it's automatic cash. Number 2, it's easily repeatable. There is no easier integration than water, wastewater. It's as easy as it gets, okay? It's always the same. Number 3, you can do the project once and copy paste for the most part. There's still integration, but it's 80% of the work is already done when you're doing water, wastewater. But integrators who specialize in water, wastewater, oftentimes that's the one of 3 projects they do. That's it. They'll do one-offs, but really their bread and butter is water, wastewater. It's the same thing in oil and gas. You have integrators who do just oil and gas. And in oil and gas, they're doing just production, or they're doing just LAC units, or they're doing just saltwater disposal and tank batteries, or they're doing just pipelines, or they're doing just sales meters. Like they specialize, and that's coming through the channel partner. It's coming through Aviva, and it's coming through SigNet, and it's coming through AutoSol. That isn't how the Industry 4 business works. The Industry 4 business is about domain experts solving problems iteratively using infrastructure. It's a completely different world. And if you're in Industry 4, whether you're working for the end user or whether you're working for an integrator or working for an OEM, if you aren't constantly focused on what is the problem I'm trying to solve here, then it's really easy for you to go down a rabbit hole. It's really easy for you to build something because you think it's awesome that is completely decoupled from the problem the customer has. I did a thing yesterday at Mastermind where I showed an example of me walking through a printing facility. So I had an overhead view of the facility, and I literally showed how I did my Gemba walk and how I walked through the plant and how I determined where the proof of concept, what questions I asked when I was in each department, and how I determined where the proof of concept was going to be done on a printing press. And I was walking through the Socratic way I get to the actual problem. I got a ton of feedback from that session yesterday, that this is one of the most valuable sessions you've ever done. And we get that a lot, but it was disproportionate. 16, 17 messages I got, DMs. And that's not normal. Normally I get like 5. And it was all about just walking through the plant and trying to understand what the problem is. And then how do I select the POC? Well, let me go back and then I'll give the example. Many of you, okay, if you're on the integration side, many of you would greatly benefit from going and working in a manufacturing facility. Okay, my career started with 5 years in a salt mine. I started by shoveling belts. Then I moved to the maintenance department running the lube truck. Then I got introduced to industrial controls. I've told this story before. I was certified in 5-volt DC systems. My supervisor saw my resume. He saw I could read IC drawings. We had a new type of mining equipment that was automated. It was German equipment called SMAG. None of the electricians could read these IEC drawings, and he asked me to go with the electrician. There was this roof bolter that had run for a year, and I did a crash course on PLCs like that night. It took me 3 days, and I fixed the bolter. It started out with me and the electrician on day one, and then he just bailed. Literally just went and slept somewhere. And I'm not even I don't know anything about 3-phase. This was 3-phase, step down to 24-volt DC control. Now, I didn't know that. I knew it was 24-volt DC control, but my certification was 5-volt DC systems. But I fixed the bolter in 3 days, and that's how I got introduced. So then my supervisor was like, hey, you belong in maintenance. You should go in the electrical department. We don't have an opening yet, but there is an opening for a mechanic. So then he gives me a crash course in diesel and hydraulic maintenance, and then has me take the test so that I can get into the maintenance team. So I go in as a mechanic, and I'm a mechanic for 6 months. I start a program, an electrical engineering program. I had already had my degree, so I only needed 2 more years to get a double E. I immediately went right back to school as a double E, and then I studied for the electrical test. I learned 4160 all the way down to 24-volt DC. I learned 3-phase. I learned delta and Y motor wirings. I learned inrush current, variable frequency drives, and there was a couple of other key questions on the test I was going to have to be able to answer. And I took the electrical testing, went in as an apprentice, and then I spent 4 years in the electrical department. I got my double E while I was as an electrician working in the mine, and I literally worked on everything in the mine. I worked on the hoists, I worked on the conveyor systems, the stamblers. I hung 4160. I worked on distribution. I did everything. I knew the entire infrastructure, including I knew the key problem that all the supervisors had and the mine manager had, which was they didn't have insight into current state. We sold salt for $25 to $40 a ton for road salt. We needed to produce X amount of tons. They would sell 25, 35 million tons. And we would know how much salt we had to produce in a year. And we would produce X amount of tons per heading shot. And each year it was the same thing. We'd go really slow in the summer, and then we'd ramp up in the fall, and then we'd be working balls to the wall overtime in the winter until the end of the season. And then literally they'd cut back to 3 days. And the reason it was feast or famine was because we had such low reliability in our each individual production days. And the reason we had low reliability is every time we had an outage, we had a power outage, e-stop on a conveyor, it took forever to get back running because we had no insight into current state. Literally, the symptom to not producing salt, that is putting salt on the belt, the symptom to not producing salt was the conveyor wasn't running. There was no indication as to why. So then they call the electricians, and we'd literally drive the fucking conveyor line. Literally drive miles. This mine was 7 miles long. And I'm like, wait a minute, we have PLCs here, and this is where the first unified namespace came from. I'm like, how can I organize the mine in a way where a supervisor could just view the mine semantically? Oh, I want to look at the individual conveyors and see where the problem is, see current state. And how can I do that in a way where I could share it with every supervisor? That's where the conversion of Data Highway Plus into dynamic data exchange going into an Excel spreadsheet that could then be viewed anywhere on the intranet by any other Excel spreadsheet. That's where that came from. UNS came from me understanding the problem that the mine actually had. And then I went to the printing industry. I left mining because I was going to get pigeonholed there. And I went to the printing industry as an electrical technician. So I'm a double E, but they don't employ electrical engineers, but they do employ techs. So I went to the printing industry and learned motion control. I learned what the key problems there were. And the key problems in the printing industry was always the printing press or environmental, the regenerative thermal oxidizer. And I put a unified namespace there. And the UNS, all the features of the UNS were designed to solve the problems of the plant, not the things I thought were problems, the things they said were problems. And then I went to the steel industry and I did the exact same thing. And then I went to tier 1 automotive and I did it again. And every time my office was on the plant floor, every time I was working with operators and electricians and engineers and supervisors. And so I became intimately aware of what the problem was. And I stayed focused on the problem. There are so many people in this industry, OEMs, integrators, not so much people who work for the end user. The end user knows the problem, who are supposed to be experts helping manufacturers and people in industry with their problems. And they never fucking ask the question, What is the problem I'm solving? The integrators I talked to this week, you want to know what the problem is they were trying to solve? Getting money in the door. And I'm saying, wait a minute, money takes care of itself if you're solving someone's problems. Focus on the problem. And by the way, that transcends all the things we do. Focus on the damn problem. You know, one of the things that I had said to the integrators this week, and by the way, these are great integrators. I mean, it's not like all of them are experts in something. It's just funny that they didn't know what they were experts in. All of them solved really specific problems. One of them found out in our conversation that their customer wasn't actually the end user. The correct customer for them was the system integrator. The system integrator is the one who needs the solution to the problem they solve, not the end user. So let me leave you with this. In this industry, if you aren't focusing on the end user's problem, you are wasting everyone's time. If you're an OEM who built a platform and you can't clearly articulate, or a piece of hardware, and you can't articulate the problem that fucking product solves, shame on you. Sit down, have a come to Jesus moment and go, what problem does the customer have that this solves? And don't say the problem they have is they have a data operations problem, okay? The customer doesn't know they have a data operations problem. Data operations is a sub-solution to a much larger solution to a very specific problem the end user has. At the end of the day, the end user isn't producing as much as they can, or they're producing more than they can, but at lower quality, or they're producing what they're producing at really high risk to their employees, or they are producing it in a way that consumes more energy than it needs to consume. Those are the problems. Another example of a problem in the printing industry is the changeovers on our printing presses take too long. The printing presses are the bottleneck in our process. A printing press costs $25 million. We can't just buy a new one to increase capacity. We've got to reduce the changeover time so the printing presses are running more minutes per day so that we aren't blocking upstream processes and we aren't starving downstream processes. If we do that, we solve that problem. That solves our issue of why is it we're selling 50 million a year and we're not doing 100 million. Stay connected to the fucking problem, for the love of God. So yeah, if you want to know how I've been successful in my life, do I have traits? Do I work hard? Am I smart? Do I have a short learning curve? You know, am I technically adept in my brain? Yes, there are certain skills I have, okay? You have certain skills too. The difference between me and most people who want to be really successful and haven't been isn't necessarily that I have skills they don't have. Many times I'm focused on the fucking problem. I'm focused on the problem and they're not. And that's an easy thing to change. All right, with that, like, subscribe, comment down below. I'll see you.